Croeso, Fulcha, Dinach, Fulcha Ort, Daymat. Welcome to the Celtic Myths and Legends podcast. My name is Sian Esther Powell, and I'll be taking you on a journey through all the myths and legends of the 6 Celtic nations. So that's Cornwall, Wales, Ireland, Scotland, Brittany, and the Isle of Man. Hello everyone, and welcome to what episode is this? Trying to do the maths in my head. 14th? 15th? Is it 15th or 16th now? Welcome to an episode. It's a episode, at least. I can't remember what number it is. Welcome to an episode. Hello there. Welcome to a episode. I am Name, here to talk to you about myth. Hello. I'm really going to start having to do end of credits audio. Do bloopers at the end of episodes, because I do usually edit out a lot of stuff, or I re-record stuff all the time. This is going to be a common occurrence. I have definitely said this to you many times before, but I've got a cold. I have got another cold, so I'm going to have to edit out a lot of coughing and horrible noises today, so bear with me. But I'm also feeling pretty hyped, pretty excited about this episode, because we are back to the Mabinogion. Awesome, it's going to be great. I've been wanting to cover more branches and just more of the Mabinogion for ages, but it takes up a lot of brain real estate, because you've got to read everything, and I know that sounds bad. I've got to read. I'm a master's student, and I'm like, oh boo-hoo, I've got to read a book. That's probably why I'm like that, to be honest. But I've got a leg to stand on, considering I have had to read the Mabinogion for my masters. Yeah, for some reason, I love it. I love it so much, but it takes a bit of energy for me, because I've got to kind of, I reread everything multiple times, and then I've got to kind of think about my angle, what am I gonna analyse, what I'm gonna bring up, and obviously the Mabinogion. Then there's a lot of academic texts written about it. So it's a really, really great thing to talk about, and I am excited to be back. So I have covered the Mabinogion before, my second episode, the second episode of all time. I'm going to talk to you today about the 4th branch. I'm just going to admit it. I'm just going to say it. I'm just going to outright say it. That another reason that I find the Mabinogion intimidating to talk about is because, okay, so I'm just about Welsh enough to be able to give the names a go, but I'm not quite Welsh enough that the names just inherently make sense to me. I mean, they kind of do, but there is always an instant reading of some of the names, and then my brain kind of trying to do the gymnastics. How do I pronounce that? I can just about figure it out if I say really slowly, so I feel really bad, because I'm half Welsh, at least I should be half able to pronounce these names. But I'm going to give it my best shot, and there's a lot of them, a lot of tricksy ones in the 4th branch. By tricksy, I do mean lovely. I do love Welsh names; they are lovely. I myself have a Welsh name, a very Welsh name, but you know what? It's one syllable. Sian. It's one syllable, so it's pretty easy to get that one. For those of you who haven't watched, bloody hell, I'm getting ahead of myself. I mean, I would like to do a YouTube series at some point, but I'm not there yet. We haven't found technology in which we can transport the voice and you can just see my face without a camera. For those of you who have not listened to my second episode, and for those of you who have, I'm going to just introduce the Mabinogion again, just say what it is. So the Mabinogion is the oldest prose literature in Britain, and it's Welsh! How exciting is that? I love it. And essentially what it is that it's a collection of different stories. So there are 4 branches, which is actually a term that is taken from French Romance literature as well, because it's almost like the story is the tree and then it branches off into these kind of different areas. So you've got the 4 branches that are kind of linked, but really not really. They're actually not linked at all. The only link between the 4 branches of the Mabinogion is that they all feature or all reference the name Pryderi. So Pryderi is a hero in the story, and he's he's born in the first branch, I believe, or he's first introduced in the first branch, and then, spoiler alert, he dies in the last branch. To be honest with you guys, like, not to be rude or anything, but if you're going to be upset about spoilers, let me just tell you that these are a collection of stories that were collected and written down in the 13th, 14th and 15th centuries. So they're pretty old. They've been out there a while. So I feel like the statute of limitations, or what is it called? I don't know what it's called. I'm a bit hyper today, probably because I'm really ill and haven't really done anything. So this is me like, oh, I'm about to accomplish something and record an episode of my podcast. But really, I'm very hyper instead. I can't remember what I was saying. Anyway, you shouldn't be upset about spoilers because these stories are really old. So they are a collection of medieval manuscripts. So a lot of these stories come from the White Book of... Is it Rhydderch is the White Book and Her Guest is the Red Book? I think it's the White Book of Rhydderch and the Red Book of Her Guest. Or it could be the other way round. That's how professional I am. But they're taken from these two books primarily. And they aren't written by one author. They aren't written to be a collection. In fact, the very name Mabinogion is actually a little bit of a typo. And that's because when Lady Charlotte Guest, a hero of mine, by the way, but when Lady Charlotte Guest created the first English translation of the Mabinogion in the 19th century, that's what she called it. She called it the Mabinogion. I think the end of each branch ends with, and so ends this branch of the Mabinogi, not Mabinogion. But Mabinogion has become a really, really convenient way in which to talk about these stories. So Mabinogion itself is a label, really, because these stories would have been written in different time periods. They would have been written by different people. Some of them would have been purely written down as like a purely literary work. Some of them would have been very much influenced and adapted from oral storytelling. Some of them would have been drawing on quite well-known Celtic mythology. What I find very fascinating about the Mabinogion is that it's medieval prose that is itself looking back at the past. So it's not describing a contemporary Wales at the time it was written. It's looking at an enchanted, romantic view of the past, and I find that really fascinating. So there's 4 branches of the Mabinogi, but then there's also a collection of 7 short stories, 7 tales, I believe. Some of those tales are grouped together as romances, and some of them are grouped together because they feature King Arthur. But there's all these different ways of grouping together these stories, but really that's just up to, really, it's up to whoever's reading them to group them and to kind of find traces and links between them as best you can, because in fact they were never written to be a collection. They were never written to be a collection at all. But Lady Charlotte Guest wrote the Mabinogion because she saw the name Mabinogi and believed that Mabinogion was the plural of Mabinogi. And Mabinogi it can be translated in a number of ways. It can be tale of youths or connected to boys, but a lot of people kind of translate it as tale of youths, or some just say it just means tale. Mabinogi just means tale, story. So there's a lot of different critical analysations of the Mabinogion, a lot of different academic takes, a lot of different translations where the various translators have brought up different aspects of it or have highlighted different things about it, but it's not an easy thing to categorise, really, other than just to say that the Mabinogion is the oldest prose literature, the oldest written prose literature in Britain, which I always, like I said, is in Wales. Really, really exciting. Does make you feel pretty proud, actually. So each of the stories really differs in style. It differs in tone. The authors, if you can call them that, were obviously interested in different things. But most interestingly to me, what I find fascinating is that although they are a look to the past, these authors, these people that collected these stories are looking back at the past, I also think that there is a very strong moral centre to these stories. There's moral and ethical beliefs are very much a strong undercurrent to all of these stories. There's a lot of themes like insult and recompense, for example, retribution, things like this. It's very much, it's not social commentary, rather than just saying, well, if you do act like this, then this happens. So it's not equivalent to kind of, political commentary, social commentary, though there is parts of these stories of some of the tales within the collection of the Mabinogion that are very satirical. Eventually I would love to cover the whole of the Mabinogion, but I would need much, much more than one episode to do so. So as it happens, I'm covering the 4th branch today. And again, it doesn't really matter what order I cover these stories in, because, as I said, they aren't chronological, they aren't linear, they're just collected together. So the 4 branches aren't like, episodes of a TV series and you have to watch episode 1 first and episode 2. They're almost like anthologies. There you go, popular pop culture reference. A lot of anthology series on the old Netflix, so I'm told. I don't really keep up to date with a lot of them, to be honest. But the Mabinogion is like a medieval anthology series. In fact, I wouldn't actually kill, because I'm quite a nice, friendly person, and murder really isn't in my future goals, as it happens. But, figuratively speaking, I would kill for Netflix or Amazon Prime or any other streaming giant. That's probably a little bit unethical, but I still contribute to them anyway because I like TV. Any of the streaming giants, if they could make a version of the Mabinogion, that would be great, but like a good version, not like a terrible one, where you actually cast loads of actors to do a Welsh accent instead of just casting like Welsh actors, because there's a lot of Welsh actors. Storytelling and acting and performing are kind of run through Welsh culture, like intrinsically. So in fact, a big thing that the Mabinogion highlights is storytelling, is this idea of oral storytelling, of performance, but also written storytelling. In fact, a storyteller features in the 4th branch of the Mabinogion, so storytelling and performance is nothing new to the Welsh. So I would love for there to be a Mabinogion version, and for it to be in Welsh. Hinterland is a recent example of a TV series that was filmed in both English and Welsh. So I would love for there to be like a modern, not modern as in it. I would just love for there to be a Mabinogion Netflix show. So Netflix, make it happen. I doubt any Netflix executives listen to my show, but if you do, make it happen, please. Another thing I want to highlight is, as I said, King Arthur features in some of the tales of the Mabinogion, not in the 4 branches, by the way. There isn't a reference to King Arthur as far as I'm aware, and if there is, I've completely forgotten it, just omitted it from my memory. Sorry, Arthur, mate, sorry about that. But there's this idea of Arthurian romance, Arthurian legends being very mystical and romantic, and that yarn has really spun by various organisations and institutions. Cough, cough, English heritage. Though I do love Tintagel. That's a discussion for another day. I have a lot of opinions on Tintagel. We will discuss that at another time. I'm sure at one point, somewhere, in some medium, in some form, you will hear me talking about Tintagel somehow. But we think of King Arthur as very romantic, very, very mystical, very chivalric and noble. Yes, there are things like tragedy and death and, murder that do transpire in these stories, but you don't think of them as being really kind of gritty. Whereas the Mabinogion is in turn horrifying, hilarious, disturbing, whimsical, magical, brilliant, all of these things. There are aspects of the Mabinogion that are hugely, hugely disturbing. This story that I'm about to, spoiler alert, content warning and trigger warning. This episode includes rape and incest and lots of other, not so lovely things. So, whereas this branch is I love the fourth branch. I love the whole Mabinogion, but the fourth branch is the most magical to me in terms of magic, is the most referenced in it. The second branch that I covered in my second episode of the show features giants, and it features magical cauldrons of rebirth. But I feel like the fourth branch of the Mabinogion genuinely has two wizards that are constantly conjuring up things and transforming people into things and all sorts of other kind of very directly magical things. There's a lot of enchantments and things like that. So I'm not going to just read word for word the Mabinogion. I'm not just going to read the story that I've got. I've got the Sioned Davies translation, by the way. It's very, very good. I know there's been a lot of translations to the Mabinogion, including Lady Charlotte Guest. Shout out to her, love her so much. My hero, to be honest. But no, there are a lot of translations, so I'm not going to tell you which one is better, which one's worse. But Sioned Davies is the translation that I've got, is the one that I reread the most. So that's the one that I'm really working from. But I'm not going to read from it. I read through the fourth branch yesterday, so it's kind of in the forefront of my brain, so I'm just going to recite it how I remember it. I'm probably going to have to edit out a lot because a lot happens in this branch and I'm probably not going to remember all of it. But here we go. So the branch starts by introducing the king, or lord, I think he's described in the branch. But you can kind of think of him as like a petty king. He rules over 7 cantrefs in Gwynedd, so he's got quite a sizable area of land that he looks after. And it also introduces his 2 nephews, Gylfaethwy and Gwydion. So all seems well in the kingdom. Gylfaethwy and Gwydion often patrol the land, look after the land for Math, because in case I didn't mention, Math constantly has to have his feet in the lap of a virgin, except in times of war, in times of turmoil and strife, like war. So Math has constantly got his feet up on the lap of a virgin Gywin, and Gwydion, oh actually no, wrong one, Gylfaethwy is in love with Gywin. So, a little bit awkward, their uncle is constantly has his feet in the lap of this virgin. I'm not sure why. I think it's like he will die if he doesn't have his feet in the lap of a virgin or something, unless in times of war. So it's really silly. It doesn't quite go into explaining it too much. It's one of those things. I wonder if the author writing it at the time was kind of being a bit satirical with the nature of like Celtic mythology and rituals and things like that. But it does make me chuckle. So Gylfaethwy is in love with Gywin, this beautiful maiden that looks after Math, son of Mathonwy. So, but everything seems good other than that. They look after their uncle's land, and it's all lovely. So, it transpires that Gylfaethwy, being so in love with Gywin, is actually becoming ill from it. He's losing the colour in his cheeks. He's looking like a shadow of his former self. He doesn't look healthy. And of course, his brother Gwydion picks up on it. And he basically says, "Brother, what's wrong with you?" And then Gylfaethwy says, "Oh, I can't tell you. It's a big secret." And then Gwydion is "No, you got to tell me, because obviously something is wrong with you." Gylfaethwy is like, "I can't tell you because any whispering on the wind that I utter will get carried to the ears of Math." So basically anything I say will get back to Math somehow, who is, by the way, a wizard. So that kind of makes things very complicated as well. So Gwydion says, "Ah, say no more, brother, for I know what it is. You are in love with Gywin." And Gylfaethwy lets out a massive sigh. he is in love with Gawain, and it has been making him ill. And he says, brother, that is true, I am in love with Gawain. And Gwydion, loving his brother, hatches an ingenious plan. He says, right, what I'll do is, so that Math and Gawain can be separated and you can have some time alone with her, what I will do is I will hatch up this scheme to go to the kingdom of Pryderi and ask him for these magical creatures that he's got in his kingdom. So basically, the king of the other world has unleashed these strange, like, magical creatures into the kingdom of Pryderi, and Gwydion really wants them. So Gwydion thinks, if I go get these magical creatures, I can use them as part of my diabolical scheme to wage war with Pryderi, because when Math goes to war with Pryderi, it means that he no longer needs his feet up in the lap of the Virgin. So Mathonwy and Gwydion and some of their men go. They ride right across Wales, and there's lots of place names that are referenced. They go here and they go there and they go there, and there's lots of pieces of the landscape that are made reference to, and there's little, like, asides from the author saying, and this is why this is named this, and this is why this is named this, and because of this, this name lives on, and things like that. And I love that, so I'm not going to spoil that for you. I definitely think that you should read the Mabinogion when you do get a chance. It's definitely worth a read. So they take their men and they go forth to Pryderi's kingdom, and they approach Pryderi and they say, they dress themselves up as storytellers and bards, and Pryderi says, I would love a story from one of you. So Gwydion says, say no more. I am the best storyteller around, so I will tell you a great story. And so he does. It doesn't really reference the story that he says. He says a brilliant story. Who knows what he talks about? Pryderi is chuffed, absolutely loves it. So when Gwydion says, look, man, may I ask you for a boon? May I ask you for a favour? Pryderi says, yes, of course you can. Gwydion says, look, can I have these magical creatures? Look at these strange creatures. I can't remember how they're described, but they're these strange little creatures. And Pryderi says, you could have asked me anything else except for that, because I have got a some kind of agreement with my people and some kind of agreement with the other world that those are my creatures and I look after them. So Gwydion goes, well, what I will do is this. I will say, don't deny me now. I will confer with my men and I will come up with another alternative for you. We can do some sort of trade. So he goes to his men. And he conjures up, because in case I didn't say, Gwydion is also another mage. He's another wizard. So you've got Math, son of Mathonwy, is a wizard. And then his nephew, Gwydion, is also a wizard. He conjures up 12 beautiful horses. And then he conjures up saddles that look like they've been spun from gold. And then he also conjures up 12 hounds, black hounds with white breasts. And he conjures up 12 golden leashes for them. And he goes to Pryderi and he says, look, Lord, I will trade you 12 of your magical creatures, or I will trade you these magical creatures for these 12 hounds with their golden leashes and these 12 horses with their golden saddles. And I will also trade you these 12, and then he sort of conjures up behind Pryderi, that's how I imagine it anyway. He just like does a little yoink, conjures up 12 golden shields. He says, look, I will also give you these 12 golden shields. Bonus buy, take it. So Pryderi goes, you know what? 12 beautiful horses, 12 majestic hounds, 12 golden shields. You know what? Yes, you can have a few of these strange little tiny creatures. I don't know why you want them so much, but yeah, you can. So Gwydion says, brilliant. Let's go now. Bye. And they go off on their way. And again, there's a lot of references to different place names. They go off across to the different lands. And then Gwydion says to his men, yeah, by the way, that enchantment's only going to last for about 24 hours. So, we better, get going pretty quickly. So I actually find it pretty funny because they visit like so many different places and so much is made of these different place names that when they finally get back home to Gwynedd, to Math, the people say to them when they arrive, look, why have you been travelling for so long? Like, Pryderi is literally waging war on us. So I don't know if they kind of slipped into the other world or something, or what happened, but they were definitely gone for longer than they should have been, which I find quite funny. It's like, quick men, hurry up, we've got to get back. Ooh, that creepy squeak was my mother bringing in pizza. So I'm gonna just have a little munch on that for a little bit, then get back to the story in a moment. So, where were we? We've got to get back, lads. And then they just take for bloody ever, don't they? Go in the scenic route. That's what they were doing. So, Gylfaethwy, Gwydion, and their men get back. And basically they're confronted with, Pryderi is basically, he's here. And Math is like, oh gosh, okay, to war we go. This has to be done. So whilst he goes to war, obviously he can then remove his feet from the lap of Gawain, and I think Gwydion helps like magic up this scenario, but Gylfaethwy and Gawain end up in the same bed, and he does rape her. He forces himself on her. I think it's really important to highlight the fact that the concept of rape really did exist in Welsh law, and I understand, of course rape exists, has existed in all times, of course it has, but it really is made very clear, and it's very clear that it is something that is upheld in Welsh law. When you look at the ancient kind of Welsh laws, rape of someone is a very serious offence. It's a very serious insult done to someone, and they should be recompensed for it. So what happens is Gylfaethwy, he does force himself on Gawain, which is horrible, of course. And then the battle happens. It is a great battle between Math's men and between Pryderi's men, and Math says, or Pryderi says, look, my quarrel lies only with Gwydion for tricking me. I don't want any more of my men to die. I don't want any more of your men to die. Let me face Gwydion 1-on-1. So, that's what happens. Gwydion goes, I will gladly accept this challenge. I will fight Pryderi myself. So the two go head to head. Quite sadly, Pryderi dies. Gwydion does triumph in this instance, probably because he is, like a wizard as well. Not only is he like a warrior and like a soldier, he is also a wizard, so he's probably enchanted some sort of tree to whack Pryderi in the face or something. I don't exactly know what happened, but he wins, and they all go back to the kingdom. Except Gwydion and Gylfaethwy don't go back straight away because they know that they've done wrong. This isn't a case of Gylfaethwy thinks that what happened wasn't, him forcing himself upon this woman. He knew what he did was wrong. So they don't go back to Math instantly. But what happens is Math comes back to his bedchambers and he goes to put his feet in the lap of Gawain, and she says, I'm sorry, Lord. You have to find another virgin's lap to place your feet upon, because I am a woman now. And Math says, what has happened? How can this be? Gawain says, your nephews, Gylfaethwy and Gwydion, forced themselves upon me, and now I'm no longer a virgin. So Math says, and I like this, he doesn't pull a bloody Athena on her and turn her into some sort of Gorgon because she was assaulted. I'm still salty about that. Still salty about that, Athena. Not cool. So basically he says, oh my gosh, that's terrible. One, I'm going to make sure that you're recompensed first for this insult done to you. And second, that I'm going to take retribution. But, first off, to repay you and to say sorry and all that, I'm going to make you my queen. So Gawain becomes the queen of Math, so, to rule alongside him. So I'm not saying that what happened to her wasn't horrible, but she was validated. He did accept that what was done to her was a terrible thing, and he did kind of recompense her accordingly in his point of view. But he is furious about this. So I guess that this technically counts as like a time of strife and turmoil and war, because, he doesn't have his feet in the lap of a virgin when he's walking around doing all this crazy beep that he's about to do. Alright, so essentially, for a long time, Gwydion and Gylfaethwy refused to come back. But eventually, when Math puts out a notice to his people, if you see these men, don't even feed them, don't even give them food and water and shelter. They eventually kind of come back, tail between the legs, and they're like, look, Uncle, really, really sorry that we, kind of tricked and assaulted and raped your virgin. But can we get some food, please? Is everything okay? Math is obviously like, no, everything isn't okay. I am big mad with you two lads, alright? So what I'm going to do something that is absolutely horrifying. I mean, he doesn't say that, but it is horrifying what he does. I mean, when you really think about it, it's one of the most disturbing things that happens within the Mabinogion. So what he does is he says, look, I'm going to turn you into a deer. One of you is going to be turned into a deer, and one of you is going to be turned into a stag. Each one, and you're going to mate with each other, and a year from this date you will come back to this very spot with your offspring. So that is what happens. He turns them into the creatures, they transform, and they mate with each other. Bear in mind, remember, these are brothers. These are brothers that get transformed into one male animal, one female animal, and then they mate and produce offspring. So it is incredibly humiliating and disturbing and kind of horrible, really truly horrifying, actually, when you think about, I mean, it doesn't really go into the whole psychology of their brains or whatever afterwards, but I'm gonna say they're gonna be pretty messed up after this whole ordeal. So that's what happens. They come back a year from the date. A servant or something comes to Math and he says, sir, the dogs are barking at something, so the hounds are barking. So Math looks down on his window and he sees that they've arrived. This hind, or this doe, this deer, a female deer, this deer, doe, this stag and his lady's stag, and their baby come back. And he says, one of you who has been the hind, is it hind? One of you who has been a hind, and one of you has been a stag, and you have produced a child. So I will call the child Mathonwy, and I will baptise him and bring him in to the household. Now go, and one of you will be a wild boar who was once the hind, and one of you will be a wild sow who was once the stag. And you will live as these animals live, and you will do as these animals do, and you will mate and produce a child, and you will be back here a year today. And that is what happens. They come back a year today. The servant says to Math, the hounds are barking again. He looks down and he sees this wild sow, this wild boar, and a great big young beast. And he names this, and he says the same thing. I will name this child Mathonwy. So he brings in Mathonwy and fosters him and baptizes him as well. And he says, look, one of you who has been the wild boar will now be a she-wolf, and one of you who was the sow will be a wolf, and you will live as these animals live, and you will do as these animals do, and you will be back here a year today with your offspring. Again, the same thing happens. They come back, Math looks down on his chamber wall, and he sees them. He sees the she-wolf and the wolf and the young cub with them. And he says, I will take this child. He looks like a strong child. I will take him and call him Mathonwy. So the 3 sons of wicked Gilvaethwy, 3 true champions, Blaethywyn, Hythywyn, and Hythywyn. And he says, "Men, I have punished you long enough. You have been humiliated long enough, having to mate with one another." So he transforms them back into their natural shapes. And he says, "Look, you've been punished enough." And he says to his servants, "Wash these men, give them clean clothes." And that's what they do. They bathe the men, give them clean clothes. And then straight back into it, Math is asking, for their advice and stuff like that. And he says, "Look, fellas, let's forget the whole horrifically disturbing thing that I have just, forced you to do for years of your life. Let's just ignore that. Tell me, which new virgin shall I place my feet upon?" And Gwydion says, "Ooh, that's a really easy one. I advise you, Aranhrod, daughter of Dion. So your niece, your sister's daughter, Aranhrod. That'll be an easy one. She is a virgin." And he says, they bring her to his chamber, and he says, "Maiden, are you a virgin?" And then she says, "This is my belief. I mean, as far as I'm aware, I'm pretty sure I am." So what Math does to test her is he sort of bends a wand and places it on the ground, and he says, "Walk over this wand." So she does, and from her drops this golden-haired child. Obviously, she's very disturbed by this. She's like, "Oh, God, gross, his child's just flung himself from me." She runs out of the room and drops something on her way out. No one else notices this thing that she has dropped except for Gwydion. He's a smart fella, that Gwydion, isn't he? Sneaky fella. So before anyone else can notice, he places it... he tucks it away in his pocket, and I think he places the item, whatever it is, in a chest at the foot of his bed. So anyway, the golden-haired baby boy that dropped from Aranhrod before she fled, Math picks him up and he says, "I will name him Dylan." So he fosters Dylan as well, and again, like the other 3 children born from that horrible coupling of the 2 brothers as animals, like those children, he kind of fosters them, or makes sure that they're looked after and baptised and everything like that. So he does good by these children. One little aside that I absolutely love is that the story kind of goes on, very briefly, only in one sentence. It says, "I will call him Dylan," and basically Dylan takes to the sea. So instantly, as soon as he can, this boy runs to the sea, and then he becomes some sort of sea creature. It says that he can swim, he can swim as good as any of the sea creatures, any of the sea animals, and presumably he can breathe underwater and everything as well. So I love that. He's kind of it's very magical. It's almost like he's this demigod. And then it says that he will eventually be killed by his uncle, and that is one of the 3 unfortunate blows. That is just something that pops up again and again in the Mabinogion, this idea of, and that was one of the 3 something, that pops up again in this branch as well, but it does make me chuckle. But also makes me pretty sad. Poor Dylan, gets sort of born out of nowhere, takes to the sea, loves the sea, and then, is killed by his uncle. So as these stories usually unfold, to be honest. But anyway, one day Gwydion is sleeping as normal, and he hears a cry. My God, we're almost on 40 minutes already, and we're only about halfway into the second branch, so this is going to be a decent sized episode for once. There you go, getting some bang for your buck, Patreons. See how I just slipped that in there, a little reference to Patreon. That was masterful, if I do say so myself. And I did say so myself because I just said it. There we go, carrying on. One day Gwydion hears a cry. It's not very, very loud, but it's loud enough to wake him up from his sleep. and it seems to be coming from his chest at the foot of his bed. So he opens up the chest, and what does he see but a beautiful, beautiful baby boy, just in the chest. So this baby grows at a very, very quick rate. So by the time the baby is 1 year old, he already looks like he's about 2 years old. By the time the baby is 4 years old, he already looks like he's about 8 or 9 years old. So he turns into this very strong youth that Gwydion kind of loves. He looks after. He kind of becomes like his father figure, really. He spends a lot of time with him. He really does care for him. And in turn, the youth really does care for Gwydion. He follows him around. They spend a lot of time together. So yeah, they do become very, very close. So one day these two are walking together, and Gwydion takes him to Caer Aranrhod. He goes up, and which is basically the kingdom where she lives, her cantref or whatever, what have you. Aranrhod goes up to meet him, and she's basically like, hello, who is this boy behind you? And he's like, this is your son. And she's like, oh my god, how dare you? You're so wicked, reminding me of this terrible thing. I'm no longer called a virgin. No one will ever call me a virgin now because of that dreadful thing that happened to me, all those years ago. To which Gwydion replies, and actually quite lovely, he replies, if your biggest shame is that you've created a child as brilliant and splendid as this one, then you don't actually have that many problems in the world. But Aranrhod says, okay, what's his name then? And he says, well, he has no name. I've given him no name. And then Aranrhod is like, aha, well, the child will have no name until I give him a name. And then, Gwydion is really upset by this. He's like, oh, God, you wicked woman. I actually kind of would love for there to be, they're probably related, so this is probably sick, but weirder incestuous things have happened in this story already. If there is a said Netflix adaptation, I would love for there to be like a bit of sexual tension between Aranrhod and Gwydion, because they've got a bit of back and forth. They've got a bit of snarky to and fro going on. So basically, he's like, oh, you wicked woman, but you will give him a name. I will make it so. Actually, I've just had a little peek at the page because I remembered what he said was quite funny. And this is it, verbatim. By my confession to God, you are a wicked woman. I just love it. It's so the high drama of it all. And he basically sticks his tongue out at her, and he's like, and by the way, no one will ever call you a virgin again. Essentially. And she's like, oh God, a rude man. And he walks off in like a huff, basically, the equivalent of it, which is hilarious. So they walk together, him and the child, or the young lad now. They walk together by the coast, and Gwydion, being the wizard, being the mage that he is, he conjures up from the seaweed and from the bits and bobs on the beach, he conjures up a great ship. And, they go onto the ship, him and the boy, and he disguises them both. He gives them two different appearances. He disguises them both as shoemakers. So he takes the ship and he steers it into the port, or the little coast for Aranrhod. So she goes out. She sends her men out to ask who this ship is on her land. And her servants come back with, oh, it's shoemakers. So she says, send them to make me a pair of shoes. So what happens is, they go back, they tell her her foot size, and they make shoes that are too big. So she takes the shoes and she says, oh, these shoes are too big. I mean, I'll pay for these shoes. I've bought them, but, please tell him to make a size smaller. So then the servants go back and they tell them, and Gwydion makes shoes that are a size too small. And she says, gosh, I will pay for these shoes, but these shoes are too small. Let me just go and see these men myself. And she goes to the ship and she says, look, I find it kind of interesting that you haven't been able to make a shoe the correct size for me. A bit sassy, isn't it? But, fair enough, to be honest. She gave him their measurements, or she gave them her measurements, and they didn't do it right. I think a bird or something lands behind her, and then the child kind of instantly kind of shoots it or something, or he gets it perfectly, and she laughs, and she's like, oh, look, the golden haired child has hit this bird. And again, the high drama of it all, because Gwydion basically says, ha ha ha, yes, and God's curse upon you, for you have named the child. And then he whips off his face. He does a whole faceless mask, a faceless man thing from Game of Thrones, where he unleashes his real identity. And he's like, ha ha ha, it was me, Mario, all along. He has got a name, and he will be named Llw Giffes. I hope that's right. I'm probably mispronouncing all of these names, by the way. Like I said, I'm Welsh enough to give them a go, but not Welsh enough to probably get them right at all. But I'm trying my best, everyone, so hopefully that's okay. But yeah, she's pretty annoyed with it. She's like, gosh, you're not even shoemakers. Ugh, how rude. You've done bad here, mate. You shouldn't have made an enemy out of me. And then, Gwydion's like, oh, whatever. And she's like, yeah, well, you know what? I'm going to put a curse on you and the boy. I'm going to put a curse on Llw Giffes and say that he will never have weapons. So how do you like those oats in your porridge? Is that a saying? Oats in your porridge? I don't think that's... Has anyone said that? What is that? Certainly that isn't in the Mabinogion. That is an embellishment of mine, which is a great key example of how these authors and reinterpreters and translators, put their own spin on things. Anyway, I digress. Whatever. So Gwydion is like, oh my gosh, you wicked woman, you wicked woman, saying that this boy will never have any weapons, but he will. I will make sure that he has weapons. I will make sure that you give him so, because part of her thing was, he will not have weapons unless I arm him. In fact, she says, I will swear a destiny on this boy that he shall never get weapons until I arm him myself. I just love that. I love the phrases in this. This is the Shona Davis translation, and I just love it. May God prosper you is some of them, and God's curse upon you. But I love that one, that I will swear a destiny on this boy that he shall never get weapons until I arm him myself. So Gwydion takes some Llw Giffes away. He says, look, lad, you look really grumpy right now, but look more cheerful, because tomorrow I'm going to hatch another plan. So what he does is that he disguises them both again as bards, as storytellers, and they go back to Caer Aranhrod, and, she welcomes them in as storytellers. And then, Gwydion, when no one's noticing, he conjures up these ships that look like, lots of armies and ships are coming in to the harbour. He called on his magic, he called on his power, and whilst the day was dawning already, trumpets are sounding, the sounds of war are happening, and Aranhrod is like, oh my gosh, what's happening? Who are these people? Come to my land. Are they invaders? What's going on? And Gwydion says, look, my lady, I will help you. If only you arm me and the boy here, or me and my companion here. And she says, oh, I will gladly do so. Gwydion says, oh, get your handmaidens to arm me, and you can arm the youth. And she says, oh, I gladly, gentlemen, thank you so much for helping me. I will do so. And of course, she arms Llw herself. And then again, Gwydion goes, ah ha ha ha, I will not help you fight. And she's like, oh, I've literally just put the weapons on you, so why now? Why are you changing your mind? And he's like, because there is no ships, ha ha ha. She turns around and she's like, oh, but what's happened then? There were ships there a minute ago. Have I just gone mad or something? And then Gwydion is like, no, it's me. It is me, Gwydion, again. Ha ha ha, you wicked woman. And she's like, oh, for goodness sake, Gwydion, you've done it again, man. Well, you know what? This is my trump card. I will swear a destiny upon this boy that he will never have a wife of humankind. He will never have a human wife. So, this doesn't stop Gwydion, of course, before he utters another, "Oh, you wicked woman, you wicked, wicked woman. I always knew you were a wicked woman." And goes off in a huff again, I'm assuming, to be honest. And he goes to Math, and they describe to Math what has happened. And he says, "Oh, okay, I mean, me and you can get together then, Gwydion. We're both magicians. And what we'll do is we'll conjure, we'll enchant flowers and create a flower maiden, create a wife for him that was made from the flowers." I haven't been reading the translation. I've got it in my hand to kind of refer to bits and bobs, but I am just reciting everything from memory. And only, when I'm making it explicit am I actually reading from the book. So I'm going to read a small passage here just because I think it's lovely. It's worded very, very beautifully, better than I can kind of sum it up. So, "Then they took the flowers of the oak, and the flowers of the broom, and the flowers of the meadow sweet, and from those they conjured up the fairest and most beautiful maiden that anyone had ever seen, and they baptized her in the way that they did at the time, and named her Blodeuwedd." I just think it's a really lovely translation, that bit, They took the flowers of the broom, the flowers of the oak, the flowers of the meadow sweet, and they created Blodeuwedd. So of course, Blodeuwedd, she's basically the bride of Frankenstein, really, isn't she? If Llw Llw Llawfelys, not Llawfelys, that's another one. If Llw Llw Gefys is our Frankenstein's monster, then she is Frankenstein's bride of Frankenstein. Why am I tripping up on this so much? Bride of Frankenstein is one of my absolute favourite Universal films. It's great. In fact, my best Halloween costume that I ever had was when I dressed up as the Bride of Frankenstein, and my mate dressed up as Frankenstein's monster, and it was just absolutely hilarious. It was in Cardiff, and all of the clubs that we went into, like whenever like a photographer or someone would come up to us to take a picture, because I'm gonna be funny, it was a pretty good outfit, pretty good costume. Thank you very much. Whenever someone came up to take a picture of us, I would put like the hands up in front of me, like, "Oh, she's alive! She's alive!" I mean, I didn't say she's alive, I did the whole dramatic hands thing though, and the face, the Bride of Frankenstein face. It's so much fun. Love it. So Blodeuwedd and Llw sleep together, and then they are man and wife. And then, Gwydion is saying to Math, he's a lovely lad, he's got to have something to call his own, essentially. And Math says, yes, I'll give him one of my cantrips. I'll give him a lovely bit of land to caretake and look after. So I'll give him a piece of land that is now Erdidwy. So all seems good and fine and well. One day Llw is, I think he's visiting Math over in Caer Dafyl, which I think is Math's one of his kingdom. So Blodeuwedd is home alone. She's walking around the court, and then she hears this great hunting trumpet, this hunting horn, and then like a great stag kind of goes past, and then she's like, "Oh, okay, maybe we should invite this hunter into the court. That's only fair." And her men are like, "Yes, that's only fair. We'll invite him in." So she invites in the hunter that was after the stag, and he sits down, and he's called Gronw, and she takes one look at him, and every single part of her is absolutely in love with Gronw, and he feels the exact same way about her. As soon as they take one look at each other, they are just filled with love for one another. So, they carry on talking throughout the night, and then they sleep together, and in the morning, Gronw says to Blodeuwedd, "Lady, I must leave." And she's like, "No, I cannot have you gone, you cannot leave yet." So they spend another day together and another night, and in the morning Gronw says, "Look, lady, I must leave." And Blodeuwedd says, "No, I cannot have you gone." So they spend another day together and another evening, and in the morning Gronw says, "Look, lady, I must leave." And Blodeuwedd says, "I will not deny you now. I will not deny you, you can leave now." And Gronw says, "Look, something needs to be done though. We're in love with each other. Something needs to be done about your husband. So you need to pretend that you still love Llw. When actually you love me, and we need to plot how we can be together." So and this is probably one of the funniest bits of the whole thing to me. I don't know why I found this whole section hilarious. So basically, well, I'm putting the book down because I don't need to even look at the book at this point because I remember it so clearly. Basically, Llw comes back, you know, in the nick of time, and he misses Gronw. So Llw comes back, and Blodeuwedd is like, "Oh, my darling, I love you so much. You look very handsome today. You're just great. Love you." Really convincingly, like really, really convincingly. But essentially, she's like, "Darling, sweetheart, pumpkin pie, how exactly can you die?" Oh my god, that rhymed. Oh my god, I'm like a poet and I don't know it. Except, you know, the very act of saying I'm a poet and I don't know it actually implies that you do know it a little bit. I always found that a little bit silly. Actually, no, she kind of gives him the cold shoulder for a little bit, and Llw's like, "Oh look, hello, you know, what's wrong with you?" And then, you know, finally she answers him, oh, "I'm just thinking about your death, to be honest, husband. I'm just thinking that one day you're going to die, and it's going to be really, really sad because what if you die before me? And like I'll be distraught because I love you so much. Just love you, husband. I love you a lot." And Llw is like, "Oh gosh, don't be worried about that, darling wife, who I love, because it's basically really bloody hard to kill me. Like it's almost impossible to kill me, actually." And of course, Blodeuwedd like, Great that you can't be killed because I love you so much." And then she's like, "Oh, okay, husband. You know, to put my mind at ease, to put my mind to rest. How exactly can you be killed?" And you know, Llw says, "Oh, I will tell you exactly how I can be killed." And he does, in great minute detail. So what he says to her is, "No man can kill me with anything other than a spear that he has worked on for a whole year." So, you know, then Blodeuwedd meets with Gronw, and she tells him about the spear. So he sets to work working on this spear. And she also goes back to him, goes back to her husband, Llw, and then says, "Oh, but exactly, what are the exact scenario and situation in which the spear would hit you that you would actually die?" Because Llw says, "Well, I can't be killed indoors, I can't be killed outdoors. Again, I basically am really quite invincible. Like, there's only one very, very specific and, you know, totally ludicrous situation in which I can be killed." And then Blodeuwedd goes, "Oh, huh? Excuse me, what was that? Ludicrous specific situation? What was that? Tell me exactly now, please, husband that I love you so much." And basically Llw says, "Okay, well, I need to bathe at the side of a river, on the riverbank, and I need to like bathe there. And also, I need there to be a billy goat on the side of my bath so that I can put one foot on the bath and one foot on the billy goat. And only in that position can I get killed." So Blodeuwedd's like, "Oh, okay, great. Thank you for telling me and putting my mind at ease because you will never die. It's gonna be really hard to kill you, isn't it? Great. Love that for me." So of course she goes back to Gronw and she tells him about the very specific situation in which her husband can be killed, and then she goes back to her husband and she says, "Husband, to really put my mind at rest, I need you to actually physically kind of enact that situation. Like, it's not enough for you to tell me in minute detail about the fact that you need to bathe on the bank of a river, you know, and have one foot on the bath and one foot on the back of a billy goat. I need you to actually come with me and bathe on this riverbank, and I'll go get some billy goats just for fun, just for funsies, hubbo. You know, love you, hubby. Just for fun that we're gonna do this, and also to put my mind at ease because I'm still very sad about your death. That will never ever happen because that's such a ludicrous situation." And obviously Llw goes, "Oh, my darling wife, of course I will do this for you." So the bloody idiot. He's an idiot, isn't he? He might be handsome, he might be strong, but let's be fair, Llw Geffys is a bit of a silly sod, okay? He's a bit of a silly sausage, not very bright, sorry to say, but I mean, come on, like. So that's what happens. He puts a foot on the bath, and he puts a foot on the billy goat. And, you know, who should be lurking by the riverbank? But Gronw. And Gronw takes the spear and he flings it over into the side of Llw. So Llw lets out this horrible scream and he turns into an owl. No, he doesn't. He turns into an eagle. Sorry, the owl is later. He turns into an eagle and shrieks and flies up into the air. So as soon as this happens, you know, Blodeuwedd and Gronw are like, well, that was completely normal. Like, nothing is ever going to come back to bite us on the butts again. That was absolutely fine and dandy. So they go back to their kingdom, and Gronw formerly ruled Penllyn, and obviously Blodeuwedd and Llw ruled Ardudwy. So Gronw takes control of Ardudwy and Penllyn together and rules them both. So when this news reaches Math, he's very sad. He's like, oh, that's quite upsetting, really, isn't it? But Gwydion is like, no, I am really upset. That was basically like my son, essentially. I'm going to go find out what's really happened to him. So Gwydion rides in the direction of where Llw's kingdom formerly was, and he stays in the house of a farmer. And in the morning he says, look, where does your sow go? And they say, look, get up early next morning and we will show you. The sow just disappears. We don't know where she goes. So that happens. He gets up really early. And Gwydion, he follows the sow as she kind of is escaping the pen and, you know, doing her own thing. And he comes into a clearing and sees that the sow is feeding on maggots and rotting flesh on the ground. And he looks up and there is this eagle on the top of the tree and it's shaking its feathers, and all these maggots and rotting flesh are falling from its feathers and onto the ground, and then the sow is eating them. And this next bit's really interesting because Gwydion performs a series of englyn. So in englyn, it's a series of Welsh poetic metres. So there are different types, and they're very strict. I think it's Welsh and Cornish, actually, interestingly enough. I would love to delve into that a little bit more and learn a little bit more about that, the connections between the two. But it's a type of short form poetry, essentially, or song. It's very, very strict in its rhyming metres. I think, obviously, this was meant to be in Welsh, not in English, so it doesn't really make sense to me. I'm not sure how I'm supposed to read the actual englyns in English in the correct way. So I'm not going to be reading them in the correct way that they would have been said whatsoever. So I'm sorry about that. But I will read from the book now the englyns that he does perform. So Gwydion, he looks to the top of the tree, he looks at the eagle, he watches the eagle shake himself, and he goes into the clearing and he says, an oak grows between two lakes, very dark is the sky and the valley. Unless I am mistaken, this is because of Llw's flowers. And the eagle lowers himself into the middle of the tree, and then Gwydion sings a second englyn, and he says, an oak grows on a high plain, rain does not wet it, heat no longer melts it, it sustained one who possesses 90 attributes, in its top is Llw Geffys. So then the eagle lowers itself down to the lowest branch just on top of Gwydion, and he looks up and he says, an oak grows on a slope, the refuge of a handsome prince. Unless I am mistaken, Llw will come to my lap. And the eagle falls down into his lap, and then Gwydion strikes him with his magic wand. Did I mention this whole time that, you know, Math and Gwydion have been rolling around and they're, you know, with magic wands? They have magic wands. So yeah, he strikes Llw with the magic wand, and Llw turns back into a man. But he is nothing like the youth that he was, this handsome, strong, you know, noble looking man. He's now wasted away. He looks pale and ill and just a shadow of his former self. himself. You know, it's described as no one had ever seen a man look more wretched than this. He was just skin and bone. So Gwydion takes him back to the court of Math, son of Mathonwy, and within a year he is fully restored and recovered. So they look after him for a year, and then he's brought back to his own self again. So, you know, after this point, Llw says, look, I really must be recompensed now for this insult done to me. You know, it's a horrible thing done to me, and I need to have my retribution. So Gwydion rides to Blodeuwedd and Gronw's kingdom, and Blodeuwedd hears about this, and she takes her handmaidens, and they run up to the mountains, and the handmaidens are so scared that they turn their face backwards as they run, and they all fall and drown in a lake. Except Blodeuwedd. Blodeuwedd is the only one that survives, and Gwydion does indeed catch up with her, and he says, I will not kill you, I will do one worse. I will transform you into a bird, but all of the other birds will hate you. All of the other birds will fear you, and every single time you show yourself to other birds, they will assault and attack you. So he turns her into an owl, and that is where the name Blodeuwedd comes from. It comes from owl, I think. But there you go, that's a little connection there between owl and Blodeuwedd. And of course, then they get up to Gronw, and they say, look, Gronw, you've done a great disservice to Llw. The only way that you can repay him, or Llw says, the only way that I think that you can repay me is for you to enact the very same scenario in which I got killed, and we'll do the same thing. And Gronw goes, oh, fine. Any of my men volunteer? And they're all like, hell no, mate. No thanks. Don't really want to do that. Thank you very much. And then there's another little aside that says, and then they were the most untrustworthy retinue, or something like that. Let me just turn the page. Yeah, and they are known from that day as one of the 3 disloyal retinues. So Gronw's like, oh my god, I can't believe anyone isn't volunteering for this, but okay, I guess I have to do it. And he says to Llw, look, mate, can I just take this stone and put this stone between me and the spear? And Llw's like, yeah, go on then. So he does it. He lies down in the bath. He puts one foot up on the bath side, and he puts one foot on a billy goat. And then he puts the stone between his body and presumably where the spear is going to hit. Llw chucks the spear, goes right through the stone, goes right into the side of Gronw, and obviously kills him. But it's said that the stone still lies on the riverbank with a hole in the middle of it. And then Llw goes back to ruling his kingdom, and everything's good. And apparently then he becomes the king of Gwynedd, and everything's lovely. And so ends that branch of the Mabinogi. So hopefully you've had fun listening to that. I had a lot of fun sharing it with you. I will cover the rest of the branches of the Mabinogi on eventually. I have a lovely poster by the side of my desk, actually, that's a map, an artistic representation of the Mabinogion, and it's like a map of Wales, and it has all these little illustrations of the various kind of creatures and events that happened in the branches of the Mabinogion. So it's never far from my mind. But that's one thing I really just wanted to highlight. It's just how funny parts of the branches of the Mabinogion are, but also how disturbing as well. If you remember correctly, in the second episode that I did, the second branch of the Mabinogion has Ethnician mutilating the horses of a man because he's not very happy that he hasn't been consulted for his sister getting married. So he mutilates Matholwch's horses, who's soon to be his brother-in-law. You know, he completely disfigures them. And later on in the story, he chucks his own nephew into a fire, you know, when they're having this lovely dinner. So yeah, the Mabinogion is filled with... It's a lot of it is dressed up in magical realism, but I love the fourth branch because it's just pure magic. Like there's no like magical realism about it. It's just, oh no, this is magic. This is magic and enchantments and powers and conjuring up of things. Whereas the other parts of the other branches of the Mabinogion just have these very magical things that happen, but they are treated as completely normal. Like, it's treated as normal that Bran the Blessed, or Bendigeid Fran, lays his body down in the water and acts as a bridge for his men to walk across, and it's described as completely normal, and you're supposed to realise from that, oh, he's a giant, you know. But nowhere does it say Bendigeid Fran the Giant or Bran the Giant. You just sort of have to guess that. And also when it makes mention of, you know, he never had a house that he could fit inside, you're supposed to go, oh, that doesn't make any sense. I guess he's a giant. Whereas the fourth branch of the Mabinogion is just pure magic, isn't it? I love it because it takes a lot of twists and turns, and there isn't just one story either. It's like a whole collection of strange little stories going on. But it's brilliant, and it's such a great example of this idea of insult and recompense. They're very moral. The stories in the Mabinogion, they have this very strong moral centre to them, and obviously the idea of, you know, rape and punishment for that. It's a very strong moral core to these stories, even though they are looking back at the enchanted past of Wales. They're reimagining the distant past of Wales, and then taking reference from Celtic mythology and from literary kind of motifs and from story themes and from oral history and all these different types of things that they're drawing inspiration from and creating these stories. So, like I said, I hope you enjoyed that. I had a lot of fun with it. It's great to read, and I really do recommend any of you read it. Like I said, I have the Sioned Davies translation. I do have a few translations of it kicking about my house, actually, but that is the newest one, I believe. It's the most recent, and it's very good. It's got a very good introduction. It gives you very good context for the Mabinogion, because it's not just Arthurian romance literature. It's something else. It's something... It's fascinating to me because, like I said, it's the oldest prose literature of Britain, but it's just this idea of something written so long ago that itself was looking at the distant past. So we are seeing like the distant past of Wales, but seen through all these different layers with added Celtic mythology and like romanticism and all that stuff added to it. So I think it's brilliant. It's a really great example of political and moral beliefs, but also references to Celtic mythology, to magic, to all of these strange customs and rituals. It's a lot of place names are referenced in it. I didn't even say hardly any of them because, one, I probably can't pronounce any of them correctly, and two, there's just a lot, so I would have just been telling you place names if I had done that. But yeah, I don't know when I will next cover the Mabinogion again. I don't want the Welsh episodes to just be about the Mabinogion. You know, Wales is a land that is rich with folklore and folk tales and legends, and I don't want it to just be the lofty literary Mabinogion that I'm going to share with you in the Welsh episodes. So I'll probably get back to some type of folkloric creature in the next Welsh episode, but you know, I have changed my mind many times, as you all well know. So if you have found your way to the end of this episode, thank you ever so much. There is probably going to be quite a few little like mouse clicking noises in this episode that I haven't been able to edit out. I have had to I've used a lot of audio clips in this essentially because I have had to pause a lot to cough. I do have a pretty nasty cold. Oh, almost got a cough then. But it's not going to get the better of me. I think I'm going to have to stop the episode soon because my coughing fits have just been like a lot in the last half hour or so. At least it gives me a very smoky edge to my voice. These constant colds that I have. Probably not good. Probably never be able to sing again. Oh, the world rejoices. The world rejoices at never having to hear my terrible voice. Anyway, thank you so much for listening. I want to say a big thank you to, again, anyone who has ever rated my podcast, who has sent me a message on Twitter or Facebook, or has just commented on Facebook or Twitter posts, and especially those who have become a patron on Patreon. So Patreon is a website where you can pledge a certain amount of money every single time I upload an episode. So you can pledge $1, $3 or $5, and it really means so much to me that people do this and support this show in this way, because I do pay to host it monthly, and I don't always upload monthly. So essentially the money that I make from Patreon goes towards my monthly hosting costs for the podcast. Eventually, my goal, I'm not ever expecting to make, big money from this I wasn't expecting to make any money from this podcast, if I'm going to be honest with you. But my dream goal is to make a little tiny bit of money from this, so that one day I can spend more time and dedicate more time to this podcast. But that's far, far, far in the future. But what I wanted to say is, if you become a $5 patron on Patreon, I will make a short episode for you, a subject of your choice. So at first I was saying, they're going to be 5 minutes long, but actually they have all turned out to be about 10 to 15 minutes long so far. I do owe a few short episodes to people, so I'm getting right on that, and you will get your short episodes soon. And my idea is that, I will make you this short episode to say thank you for being a $5 patron. It means a lot to me. But eventually I will compile those episodes together and to make a bonus episode. So I think my next episode that I post will likely be a bonus episode, which will be a compilation of the short mini episodes that I have made already. I've made a few. I think I have made enough to post as an episode. So these bonus episodes will not be chargeable to patrons, because obviously that would be missing the point completely. It'd be like, here's your reward for being supportive of me, also I'm charging you. It wouldn't make any sense. So bonus episodes will never be charged to patrons again, but on Patreon I charge every single time I upload something, and because I don't upload every single month, that seemed the fairest way of doing it to me. Again, I don't like to harp on too much about Patreon, but I feel like I've just done well over an hour episode, so I feel like I'm safe to plug it now. I've made enough content for tonight, if you will. Eventually I would probably quite like to make a YouTube series. Again, I've talked about it before, Sean's Yarns, that someone's gave me that name before, one of my friends, and I thought that would be hilarious to do that. But I live in Cornwall, and Cornwall is exceptionally windy. It's incredibly bloody windy here. So like every single time I go out with my phone and I go to make a small video when I'm out and about on my walks and I want to share it with people, you can't hear anything because of the wind. So there we go, Cornwall. Thank you very much. I believe the next episode we are back to Ireland. I think we're back to Ireland. So haven't decided exactly what that episode is going to be about yet. So my next episode probably will be the bonus compilation there. So I can give myself some time to research what I'm looking at, that type of thing. Exciting. Also, it's pretty exciting. It's just been uploaded, the episode that I did with House of Legends, so go and listen to that if you haven't already. I'm on the latest episode of House of Legends, and it was really great to be on that show. It's one of my favourite podcasts, and hopefully you enjoy that. And I've also recorded an episode with the History A podcast. That's a great podcast as well, actually. It's really eclectic. It is like a history podcast, but essentially what Rosie does is that she interviews people with like completely varying types of interests, and then just asks them to kind of go into their specialist topic and talk about like the history of that or whatever. So that's really great. I was really chuffed to be on that show as well. I'm not sure when that one's going to be uploaded, but hopefully that'll be uploaded soon, so keep an eye out for the History A podcast and my episode on there. I remember we were talking for hours, so she's got a lot of content to edit, bless her. Very sorry about that, I do waffle on quite a bit. But I will now love you and leave you, everyone. Thank you so much for listening. Hopefully you've enjoyed this, maybe my longest episode that I've ever done, but there we go. Woohoo! Good night.